Laura never imagined that that night would change her life forever. I was at a friend's party, surrounded by people, music, and laughter. She didn't intend to stay long. She had only gone to keep her friend Sophia company, who insisted that she have fun. For Laura, finding someone special had been an increasingly distant dream. After several disappointing relationships, I had lost some hope in true love. However, just as he was thinking about leaving, he saw him. Daniel was standing across the room, with a warm smile and a look that seemed to cut through the bustle. Tall, elegant, and with a confidence that did not go unnoticed, his presence radiated a natural charisma. When their eyes met, Laura felt a strange mixture of nerves and excitement. She didn't know how, but something in her eyes made her feel like she already knew him, like they were destined to meet that night. Without thinking twice, Daniel approached her and extended his hand, introducing himself in a soft and seductive voice. "Hello, I'm Daniel. I couldn't help but notice that you have the most beautiful smile in this room." Laura blushed, surprised by his sincerity. His words were direct, but far from invasive, they felt genuine. After a few minutes of conversation, Laura felt like she was talking to someone who really understood her, who listened to every word as if it were the most important thing in the world. The night continued and the connection between them grew with each word, each shared laugh. Daniel was not only charming, he was also attentive. At one point, he noticed that Laura had run out of drink, and without saying anything, he went to get a glass of wine for her, the exact kind she liked. "I like to observe the details," he said with a soft smile. "The small details are what say the most about a person." Laura was surprised. How could anyone understand her so quickly? That gesture, seemingly simple, felt like a statement that he was really interested in getting to know her deeply. That night didn't end there. Before saying goodbye, Daniel handed her a small package wrapped in a red velvet bag. "It's just a small gift, but I want you to have something to remember tonight," he said in a mysterious tone. Upon opening the package at home, Laura discovered a delicate silver necklace with a small heart-shaped pendant. It was subtle and elegant, just his style. That night, Laura fell asleep with the necklace on, feeling as if she were in a dream, imagining what could be the beginning of something wonderful. The following days were a whirlwind of emotions for Laura. Daniel was constantly looking for her, sending her good morning messages, wishing her a great night and reminding her how special she was to him. At each meeting, there was no shortage of flowers and small details, such as chocolates and handwritten notes. "You're like a breath of fresh air in my life, Laura," he would say as he handed her a white rose, her favorite flower. How could he know that she was his favorite? The attention and care with which he seemed to remember every detail made her feel valued in a way she had never experienced. Little by little, Laura began to trust him, to let her guard down and let that feeling grow inside her. Daniel treated her with a tenderness that seemed almost unreal. There wasn't a time when he didn't look her in the eye and tell her how beautiful she was, how lucky he felt to have found her. On every date, he made her feel like she was the only woman in the world, as if nothing and no one could come between them. One Saturday afternoon, Daniel surprised her by taking her to an art gallery. "I know you love painting," he said with a mischievous smile. Laura, again surprised, felt the ground disappear under her feet. How could someone be so perfect, so attentive to his tastes and passions? For hours they walked around the gallery, commenting on the paintings and laughing, immersed in their own world. That day, as they said goodbye, Daniel took her hand and kissed it softly, a gesture full of affection that made her heart race. "I don't want to rush, but I feel like this is just the beginning of something wonderful," he whispered in her ear before saying goodbye. Laura returned home with her heart pounding, convinced that she had found her soul mate. For Laura, every encounter with Daniel was proof that true love existed, that she had found someone with whom she could build a future. The days passed, and with every appointment, every detail, every word, her trust in him grew. Daniel told her about his dreams, the projects he wanted to make, the trips he wanted to take, and how he longed for her to accompany him in each of them. "I can't imagine my life without you, Laura," he said one day as he looked into her eyes, filling her with hope. At the end of the week, Daniel invites her to a special dinner and promises that he will reveal something that will change their relationship forever that night. Laura, excited and nervous, feels like she's about to discover a new chapter in her life, one she'd always dreamed of. The night of the great dinner arrived, and Laura could not hide her excitement. She spent hours getting ready, choosing the perfect dress and styling her hair carefully. She knew that night would be special, because Daniel had made her feel that something big was coming, something that would change her life and their relationship forever. When they finally met at the restaurant, Daniel greeted her with a dazzling smile and a bouquet of white lilies, his favorite flowers. "For you, my angel," he whispered in her ear as he embraced her. Laura felt her heart racing. Every gesture, every detail of Daniel seemed to be taken from a fairy tale. He led her to the table, carefully decorated with candles and rose petals, creating an intimate and romantic atmosphere. During the first few minutes of dinner, they talked about everyday things, laughing and enjoying each other's company. But Laura could tell that Daniel was nervous, as if he was putting away something important that he didn't dare to say yet. Finally, after a couple of glasses of wine, Daniel took her hand and looked deeply into her eyes. "Laura," he began in a soft, sincere voice, "I know we've spent little time together, but I feel like I've known you all my life. You are everything I have ever wanted, and every day you make me feel more complete." Laura felt a lump in her throat. Her words were so sincere, so full of emotion, that she couldn't help but feel moved. "I know this may sound hasty, but I want you to be a part of my life in a special way," he continued, gently squeezing her hand. Laura, surprised, could hardly contain her emotion. No one had ever spoken to him like this, with such fervor and desire to build a future together. Daniel continued to speak, describing the plans he had for them. He told her about a business he was about to start, an ambitious project in which he had put all his effort and dedication. It was an innovative idea, a chain of eco-friendly hotels that would seek to revolutionize sustainable tourism. "Imagine love," he said excitedly, "beautiful places where people can connect with nature, getting away from the stress of the city. And you would be my partner in all this. You would help me build a dream together, give shape to this vision." Laura couldn't believe her ears. The idea of being by Daniel's side in something so big, of being his support and of forming a team, was almost unreal to him. He felt important, as if he were a key piece in his life and in his plans. "I had never imagined anything like this," she replied with a shy smile, "but the idea that we can work together and build something so beautiful makes me very happy." Daniel looked at her tenderly and caressed her cheek, making Laura feel a comforting warmth in her chest. As the dinner progressed, Daniel told her about all the details of the business, how he planned to look for investors, and the effort he had already put into the project. Laura listened to every word fascinated, feeling more and more in love with this passionate and visionary man. Suddenly, Daniel changed his tone and confessed something that took her by surprise. "Love, I'm honest with you. Although I have the project almost ready, these last few months I have had some financial problems. It's not easy to start from scratch, and I've had to make some sacrifices." Laura, without hesitation for a second, took her hand and gave her a look of support. "Daniel, you don't have to explain anything to me. If you need my help, I'm here. I want you to know that I trust you and your project. And if at any time you need support, don't hesitate to ask me." Daniel thanked her with a grateful smile, and for a moment, Laura felt like she had done the right thing. She was sure that her love for him was genuine, and that supporting his dreams was the best decision. After dinner, Daniel surprised her by taking her to a viewpoint from where they could see the entire city. They stood silently, embracing each other, as they stared at the twinkling lights in the distance. Daniel wrapped her in his arms and whispered in her ear, "One day, this will all be part of our past. We will remember these nights as the beginning of something great." Laura, excited, could only nod, feeling that, at that moment, her life had taken on a new meaning. The days that followed that night were like a dream. Daniel did not stop showing her his love through small gestures, unexpected surprises, and words of encouragement. One day, he showed up at her house with a gift box. Inside was a thin and delicate bracelet, with a small infinity-shaped charm. "To remind you that our love has no end," he said, gently placing it on his wrist. Laura was convinced that she had found the perfect man, someone willing to do anything to see her happy. With every detail, every word, and every look, Laura felt more confident in her feelings and the relationship she was building. She told herself that Daniel was the love she had always dreamed of, the man who was willing to build a future together, facing any obstacle that stood in his way. The doubts that at some point arose in her mind vanished with each gesture of hers, every time he hugged her and promised her a forever full of dreams and promises. One afternoon, Daniel looked her in the eye and said with a seriousness he had never shown before, "Laura, I want to ask you something very special. Something that will bring us even closer together and take our relationship to the next level." Laura, intrigued and excited, prepared to listen, not knowing that this request would change the course of her life forever. Since that special dinner, the relationship between Laura and Daniel seemed to be going from strength to strength. For her, every day was a confirmation that she had found her soulmate. However, as the weeks went by, small signs began to emerge that caused him a slight uneasiness, but that he preferred to ignore. For example, Daniel had a habit of deflecting some questions about his past or changing the subject when Laura mentioned her family. Sometimes, he even avoided answering calls in her presence, putting his phone on silent and quickly putting it in his pocket. Laura didn't think much of it, convinced that everyone had a right to some privacy, and that, perhaps, he just wasn't ready to open up in some ways. But doubts began to grow when one afternoon, while they were in a cafe, Laura met her childhood friend, Mariana. After the obligatory introductions, Mariana observed Daniel with some suspicion. Throughout the conversation, Laura noticed that her friend was looking at him out of the corner of her eye, as if she were trying to remember something. Later, when Laura and Mariana were alone, her friend gave her an unexpected warning. "Are you sure who this man is, Laura?" he asked in a serious tone. Laura was surprised, not understanding what she meant. Mariana continued, explaining that there was something about Daniel's way of acting that seemed familiar. "Just be careful, friend. Sometimes people are not who they appear to be," Mariana told her before saying goodbye. Laura tried to make no small difference to her friend's words, but she couldn't help but let a small shadow of doubt settle in her mind. Days later, while reviewing some papers at Daniel's house, Laura found an envelope with documents that did not appear to be his. The address and name on the letter were different, but the last name matched Daniel's. Surprised, she asked him why he had those documents, but he, with his usual charming smile, explained that it was something unimportant, a confusion of papers in the bank. The explanation seemed reasonable, and Laura decided not to insist any further. However, doubts continued to grow in his mind. She remembered Mariana's words and couldn't help but feel a little uneasy. Even though she loved Daniel deeply, an inner voice prompted her to be cautious. That's when she decided to investigate on her own. Without saying anything to him, Laura began to ask discreet questions to some people in common, seeking to understand more about her partner's past. He discovered that Daniel had a complex history and, according to some acquaintances, a series of failed projects that had left him in a complicated financial situation. One night, while they were having dinner, Laura could not contain her emotions and decided to confront him. "Daniel, I want to be honest with you. I'm concerned about some things I've heard. I've noticed that you don't talk much about your past, and sometimes it seems like there are things you don't want me to know." Daniel looked at her surprised, but without losing his usual calm. He took her hand and answered her with unexpected serenity. "Laura, I know you have doubts, and it's natural. I've had a complicated life, I've made mistakes, I've tried projects that didn't go as I expected. But if there's one thing you can rely on, it's my love for you. With you I want a new beginning, a future without shadows." His words disarmed her. Daniel spoke with a sincerity that seemed to break down any barrier of distrust. Laura seemed to see a vulnerable side in him, someone who had suffered but still wanted to leave his past behind and build a different life by his side. She decided to give him a vote of confidence, convinced that, despite the problems that might arise, her love for him was stronger. The days that followed were filled with small gestures by Daniel to reaffirm his love. He surprised her with flowers, unexpected outings, and, on one occasion, he gave her a handwritten letter where he described everything she meant to him. In the letter, Daniel expressed his fears and insecurities, but also his conviction that, with Laura by his side, he could face any challenge. Laura, moved to tears, felt that she had made the right decision to trust him. However, an unexpected twist came when, during an outing to the city center, Laura saw Daniel in a heated conversation with a man she did not know. As he approached, Daniel quickly said goodbye to the man and, with a somewhat tense smile, told him that he was nothing important, just an acquaintance from the past. Laura, confused, noticed the discomfort in her eyes, but once again decided not to ask. "I believed that Daniel was simply going through a difficult stage and that it was best to support him without questioning him too much." Despite all her promises and gestures of love, Laura's doubts did not disappear completely. And just when he thought everything was in order, Daniel asked for considerable financial help, assuring him that it would only be a temporary loan, something that would soon be resolved. Laura, with a divided heart, found herself at the crossroads of her life, helping the man she loved or listening to the warnings of her intuition. Laura spent the whole night without sleeping, her mind spinning between memories, doubts, and mixed feelings. Daniel's request for a significant loan had left her bewildered. Why did such an ambitious and successful man, as he had described himself, need so much money urgently? Despite her doubts, the love she felt for him seemed to push her to want to help him. After all, if you were building a future together, wasn't it normal to support each other through difficult times? The next day, Daniel surprised her at home with a bouquet of flowers and a smile that dismantled any barrier of mistrust. "Love, I know this has taken you by surprise, and I'm sorry I put you in this situation," he said in a soft voice, as he handed her the flowers. "You don't know how much it means to me that you're by my side right now." Laura felt a knot in her stomach, unable to express the doubts that invaded her. She just nodded and accepted the flowers, trying to convince herself that, perhaps, she was being too suspicious. That afternoon they went for a walk in a park, as they used to do on their dates at the beginning of their relationship. Daniel took her hand and began to talk to her about his dreams and projects. "Love, I can see you together in a wonderful future. I imagine a house on the beach, our lives full of adventure and happiness. All of this is just a temporary obstacle," he assured her as he looked at her tenderly. Laura, captivated by his words, felt like she was on a roller coaster of emotions. On the one hand, he wanted to believe in that idyllic future he described, but on the other, he couldn't help but wonder if he was making a mistake by ignoring the signs. Finally, after days of indecision, Laura decided to trust him and make the loan. She told herself that, if they were truly meant to be together, this would just be an obstacle that they would remember as proof of their love. She gave him the money at an intimate gathering at his home, where Daniel received her with a candlelit dinner as a thank you. "You have no idea what this means to me, Laura. It's not just the money, it's your trust in me. It's knowing that I have someone like you by my side." Daniel hugged her, and for a moment, Laura felt like she had made the right decision. The next few weeks were like a dream. Daniel seemed to have regained the confidence and energy that characterized him. He would take her to fancy dinners, surprise her with small gifts, and spend hours talking about their future together. Laura began to feel her doubts dissipate, as if the decision to help him had strengthened their relationship. However, something inside her was still uneasy, as if a part of her could not put aside suspicions. One day, while they were together in a cafe, Laura noticed that Daniel was receiving constant messages on his phone. He ignored them, but the brightness of the screen and the frequency of the messages caught his attention. Laura, trying to hide her discomfort, asked if everything was okay. Daniel, without losing his usual calm, explained that they were only work matters, something that he had to solve soon. "I don't want to worry you with my problems, love," he said with a charming smile. But Laura couldn't help but feel that something was off. Soon after, Daniel began canceling his appointments and disappearing for days on end. Whenever Laura tried to contact him, he would respond with last-minute excuses, claiming that he was busy resolving important matters related to his business. Laura began to feel growing anxiety and frustration, but she convinced herself that she should give him space and trust him. In spite of everything, he still thought that love should be based on trust and mutual support. One night, after several days without seeing him, Daniel surprised her at home with a bottle of wine and a big smile. "Sorry for disappearing for so long, my love. They have been very difficult days, but I do everything for us," he told her as he hugged her. Laura, though relieved to see him, couldn't help but ask him why he was being so evasive. However, before she could answer, he kissed her and looked deeply into her eyes. "Trust me, love. Soon all this will be behind us, and we will have the life we always dreamed of." That night, Laura tried to convince herself that she had been very paranoid and that her love for Daniel was stronger than any doubt. She clung to the idea that he loved her and that, perhaps, her situation was more complicated than she imagined. However, her suspicions intensified when, the next day, one of her friends told her that she had seen Daniel in a restaurant in the city with another woman. Laura tried to calm down, thinking that it could be a work meeting or a coincidence, but the idea that he could be hiding something from her left her uneasy. Filling her mind with unanswered questions, Laura decides to face him again, determined to uncover the truth. But just as he is about to do so, he receives an unexpected message from Daniel asking him for one last favor, something that will test everything that remains of his confidence. Laura had remained restless since that night when Daniel asked her for a last favor. "I felt a weight in my chest, a mixture of pain and distrust that refused to go away." Daniel had asked him for an even larger sum than the previous one, claiming that with that he could finish solving the problems of his business. He said he was about to close a crucial deal, one that would ensure his financial stability and thus the future they had both planned together. Despite her misgivings, Laura decided to help him once again, although this time she made it clear that she needed more transparency. "Daniel, I need to know that you are really being honest with me. Lately, I feel like there are things you don't tell me. I don't want to think I'm losing you." He looked at her with a pained expression and assured her that this would all be over soon, that the money was only a temporary measure. "You are the best thing that has happened to me, Laura. I wouldn't lie to you," he said, taking his hands in his. However, just a few days after giving her the money, Laura began to notice alarming changes in her behavior. Daniel began to cancel their meetings suddenly, leaving her waiting with vague excuses or messages without answers. Days went by, and every time she tried to call him, his phone seemed to be out of service or not answering at all. The anxiety in Laura's heart grew with each silence. Mariana's warnings echoed back to her mind, and she began to wonder if everything Daniel had told her was nothing more than a web of lies. Determined to uncover the truth, Laura decided to take matters into her own hands and seek answers on her own. She called several people in common who had met Daniel at past events and, although most of them only had good impressions of him, there was a contact who mentioned something that left her cold. "Daniel? It sounds familiar, but be careful. I think I've heard that this man has had problems in other relationships, money problems," the acquaintance commented with some caution. Laura, her heart in a fist, continued to investigate, trying to find out if Daniel had had any past relationships that he hadn't told her about. To her surprise, she discovered through a social network that Daniel appeared in old photos with a woman she did not know. The photos showed a happy couple on what seemed like a trip to the beach, sharing moments that clearly belonged to a past that he had hidden. Confused and hurt, Laura decided to confront Daniel directly. Taking advantage of the fact that he had told her that he would be in a meeting, she decided to go to the place and wait to see him leave. After waiting a couple of hours, he finally saw him, but he was not alone. He was accompanied by a woman, the same woman in the photos, and he behaved in an affectionate way with her. Laura watched as Daniel hugged her and said something in her ear as they laughed together. The scene was like a direct blow to the heart, as if everything they had experienced was nothing more than an illusion. Desperate, Laura decided to confront him at that moment. He approached him and called him by name. Daniel, when he saw her, was paralyzed, unable to hide his surprise. The woman who accompanied him also looked confused and turned away from him, looking at Laura with a surprised expression. "What's going on here, Daniel? Who is she?" Laura tried to keep her composure, but her voice trembled, as did her hands. Daniel, with a panicked expression, tried to excuse himself and began to make up a confusing story, claiming that the woman was just a longtime friend. But Laura couldn't believe him anymore. Grief and betrayal overwhelmed her, and she couldn't understand how she had come to trust someone so much who now seemed to be a complete stranger. The woman, seeing the situation, explained to Laura that she had been dating Daniel for a couple of months, and that he had also promised her a future together. Hearing this, Laura felt as if the ground opened up under her feet. She realized that she wasn't the only one, that Daniel had been manipulating her, making empty promises while playing with her feelings and her confidence. "What kind of person are you?" he shouted, unable to hold back tears. "How could you play with my feelings like that? Was all this a lie? Everything you said to me, every word, every promise." Daniel tried to justify his actions, but Laura didn't want to listen anymore. Her heart was broken, and the image of the man she thought she loved had become a nightmare of deceit and lies. With tears in her eyes and her heart shattered, Laura turned and left, leaving Daniel there, aware that he had lost forever someone who had truly loved him. As she walked, Laura felt the pain consuming her, but also a small spark of determination began to burn inside her. She knew she wasn't going to let that betrayal define her. She had lost money, she had been deceived, but she was not going to let Daniel break it completely. After that painful discovery, Laura decides it's time to seek justice and reveal Daniel's lies. She contacts other women who, like her, have fallen victim to his deceptions and begin to plan how to face the truth and expose Daniel for who he really is. Laura returned home after the heartbreaking encounter with Daniel and could barely hold back her tears. The images of him, laughing and hugging another woman, were repeated in his mind like torture. She felt devastated, hurt, and at the same time, full of rage. Every time she remembered the promises he had made to her, the dreams they built together, she felt as if every word, every gesture, had been a mockery. Days passed in which Laura could barely get out of her bed. Sadness consumed her, but little by little, a new emotion began to take hold in her heart: determination. She wasn't going to be silent, she wasn't going to let Daniel go on with his life as if nothing had happened, while she and perhaps other women suffered because of his lies. Remembering the advice of her friend Mariana, Laura decided to gather as much information as possible and contact other people who could also have been victims of her deception. With a tight heart and trembling with nerves, he began to investigate. Digging deeper, she found social media groups where women shared their experiences of toxic relationships and emotional scams. Laura posted an anonymous message, describing in general terms the situation she had been through, without mentioning specific names. Soon, other women began to respond, and some even shared stories incredibly similar to hers. Among them, two women claimed to have met someone who matched Daniel's description and shared details that made Laura realize she wasn't the only one. It was as if Daniel had a pattern, a well-calculated strategy to seduce, manipulate, and then disappear after getting what he wanted. With this new information, Laura arranged a meeting with the other victims at a cafe in the city. As they met and shared their experiences, each of them recounted how she had met Daniel, how he had made them fall in love, and finally how he had managed to get money or goods from them before disappearing or making excuses to walk away. The stories were similar, but the specifics of each only strengthened Laura's conviction. Daniel was a professional con artist, someone who used people's love and trust for his own benefit. "It's time to do something about it," Laura said, with a firmness in her voice that surprised everyone. The women, though still wounded, began to see in Laura a leader, someone who had not only gone through the same pain, but was also willing to fight for justice. They decided that they could not remain silent, that they deserved justice, and that, at least, other women should not fall into the same trap. Together, they came up with a plan. First, they would collect as much evidence as possible: messages, photos, money transfers, and any other documents that could prove Daniel's deceptions. They knew that if they joined forces and presented all the evidence in an organized manner, they would have a better chance that the authorities would take their case seriously. Laura took it upon herself to contact an attorney who specialized in fraud and emotional manipulation cases, someone who could guide them and help them understand their rights. When they met with the attorney, he listened carefully to each testimony and reviewed all the evidence they had gathered. "This is more common than you imagine," he told them, "men and women who emotionally manipulate their partners for profit. But in this case, we have enough evidence to bring this to justice." Laura felt a mixture of relief and fury when she heard his words. It was as if every tear he had shed, every sleepless night, now had a purpose. The lawyer explained that the process would be long, that there would be difficult moments, but that, if they were willing to fight, they could get Daniel to face the consequences of his actions. The women, still afraid, agreed to support each other, knowing that this union was their best weapon. Laura, in particular, felt that she finally had a clear mission: to expose Daniel, to make him pay for all the pain he had caused, and to warn others not to be deceived as she had been. In the weeks that followed, each of the women gathered additional documents and evidence. They also sought out other potential victims, and while some were too embarrassed to speak out, others decided to join the cause. Laura, meanwhile, felt her pain transform into strength. Every step he took toward justice was a step toward his own healing. She had ceased to be the broken and deceived woman, now he was someone who fought for truth and dignity. One day, while going through old messages from Daniel, he found something that gave him a new clue. He recalled that he used to mention certain friends or business associates, people who seemed to be aware of his projects. Determined to find out more, Laura began to investigate those people as well, and soon realized that some of them, far from being her friends, were people who had also been scammed or deceived in some way. Just when they felt they were close to an important revelation, they received an unexpected message. Someone claiming to know Daniel had decided to contact them and had crucial information about his true whereabouts and the next moves he planned to make. Laura, full of adrenaline, felt that they were about to discover the full truth and that, finally, Daniel would face the consequences of his actions. The weeks of research and effort had paid off. Laura and the other women, now united by the same goal, had gathered enough evidence to incriminate Daniel. Each had contributed her part, from documents to messages and records of money transfers. With the support of the lawyer, they managed to present the case to the authorities, who began a formal investigation into Daniel's multiple deceptions and frauds. However, they still lacked something: to face him face to face and see how the mask of the man who had manipulated them fell off. It was then that, one afternoon, Laura received an unexpected message. An unknown number contacted her, saying that she knew Daniel and that she had important information. At first, she hesitated, thinking that it might be a trap, but upon hearing the details, she realized that this person really knew about Daniel's lies. It was an old friend of his, someone who, upon learning of his deceptions, had decided to help women expose him. This contact informed them that Daniel planned to leave the city in a few days, probably to escape the consequences of his actions. Laura and the others knew that this was their last chance to catch him and face him once and for all. With their hearts racing and a mixture of anxiety and determination, they decided to put the final plan into action. That night, Laura arranged a meeting with Daniel, making him believe that she wanted to talk to him one last time, to close the story between them on good terms. He, confident and unsuspecting, accepted the invitation, perhaps believing that he still had control over her and that he could manipulate her once again. However, this time, Laura was prepared. With the other victims and the lawyer, they had arranged the meeting in a public place, where they would feel safe and could confront him without him being able to escape easily. When the time came, Laura waited in a quiet cafeteria, her face reflecting a mixture of grief and resolve. The minutes seemed eternal as I waited for him to arrive. Finally, she saw Daniel enter, with that charming smile that had once captivated her. He approached her, confidently, and took a seat in front of her. However, this time, Laura couldn't help but notice the falsehood in her gestures, as if her every move was part of a calculated show. "Laura, I'm glad you wanted to see me," he began, his voice sweet, as if nothing he'd done was real. I've been thinking a lot about you, about what we've been through. Maybe we could put everything that happened behind us and start over." Laura, showing no sign of emotion, stared at him, allowing him to speak. As he continued his speech, she felt a mixture of sadness and contempt for the man she had once loved. Finally, when he finished speaking, Laura said to him in a firm voice, "Daniel, there's something I need to tell you." At that moment, he made a sign and, one by one, the other women entered the cafeteria, surrounding the table where he was sitting. Upon seeing them, Daniel lost the color of his face, realizing that something was terribly wrong. Every single woman he had deceived was now there, confronting him with the truth. "What is this?" he stammered, trying to keep his composure. But Laura did not give him time to react. "This is the end of your lies, Daniel," he said in a cold voice, showing him the evidence they had gathered, photographs, messages, transfer receipts. Everything was there, exposed in front of him, making it clear that he could no longer escape. Daniel tried to justify himself, saying that it had all been a misunderstanding, that he had never meant to hurt anyone. However, the women confronted him one by one, each narrating her story, reminding him of how he had played with her feelings and confidence. The lawyer, who was present, also explained that an investigation was already underway and that he would soon have to answer to the law. The tension in the cafeteria was palpable. Daniel, cornered and with no escape, began to show his true face. His attitude changed, going from serenity to despair and then to anger. "And what do you want from me?" he shouted, losing his cool. "I just did what I had to do to get ahead. If you were naive enough to believe me, it's not my fault." His words, full of cynicism, only reinforced the conviction of Laura and the others that they were doing the right thing. "Perhaps you thought you were going to get away with it forever," Laura replied in a firm voice, "but you can't fool us anymore. You underestimated us, you thought you could play with us and then disappear. But now we're the ones making sure you pay for all the damage you caused." Daniel, defeated and with no escape, finally fell silent, knowing that his time was up. The authorities, alerted by the lawyer, arrived shortly after to take him away, and each of the women watched him as they escorted him out of the cafeteria. Laura felt a mixture of relief and sadness. She had lost something important, she had been betrayed in the worst way, but she also knew that she had gained something valuable, her dignity and the strength to defend herself and other women from men like him. With Daniel facing the consequences of his actions, Laura and the other women find new motivation to keep going, knowing that although they have suffered, they are now stronger and ready to start over. After that final confrontation, Laura felt as if an immense weight had been released from her heart. Seeing Daniel taken away by the authorities and facing the consequences of his lies gave him a sense of justice and closure. But, at the same time, a deep sadness and emptiness remained inside him, reminding him of the price of having given his trust and his love to a person who did not deserve it. The following days were difficult. The image of Daniel, his deceptive smile and the promises of love he had made to her, came back to her again and again. Even though she had made a firm decision when confronting him, she couldn't help but feel a deep wound. She questioned herself, wondering how she had possibly ignored so many signs, how she had come to put her heart in the hands of someone who was never sincere. Determined to heal and better understand what had happened, Laura sought professional help. She attended therapy sessions, where for the first time she began to explore her own insecurities and shortcomings, aspects of herself that she had not previously wanted to face. In those sessions, Laura realized that for a long time she had carried a deep desire to be loved and accepted, a longing that had led her to blindly trust Daniel. The therapist explained that sometimes, when we don't know ourselves deeply, it's easy to fall into relationships that prey on our vulnerabilities. As she delved deeper into her emotions, Laura began to recognize that, in part, she had looked to Daniel for validation that she needed to find within herself. He realized that instead of listening to his own feelings and intuitions, he had let Daniel's attention and affection cloud his judgment. Their love had been sincere, but it had also been impulsive and lacking clear boundaries. She learned that in order to have a healthy relationship in the future, she first needed to work on her own self-love, self-worth, and self-confidence. As the weeks went by, Laura began to feel more and more free. She had stopped constantly checking her phone waiting for a message, and now she found peace in her loneliness, in her own routines, and in the small details of daily life. She realized that she had neglected many of her passions while she was with Daniel, focused on making the relationship work at any cost. With the time she now had for herself, she resumed activities that had always brought her joy: painting, hiking, and reading novels. Little by little, she was rebuilding her life, finding satisfaction in those moments of tranquility and connection with herself. One afternoon, while walking in the park where he used to walk with Daniel, he felt at peace. He looked at the trees, the sky, and the families passing by, and for the first time in a long time, he felt no sadness or longing. He understood that this place was no longer marked by the memory of Daniel, but by his own story, a story of overcoming and self-love. She now knew that before she could look for love in someone else, she had to learn to love and respect herself, listen to her own needs, and set clear boundaries in her relationships. The other women who had shared her pain had also become friends and allies in her healing process. Often, they would gather to talk about their lives, to share their progress, and to remind each other of the strength each had shown in facing and exposing Daniel. The friendship that had been born between them gave Laura a new perspective on the value of sincere and mutually supportive relationships. He learned that love didn't always have to be romantic. Friendship and shared respect were also forms of love that helped her grow and strengthen. The legal process against Daniel progressed, and, over time, he was convicted of fraud and emotional manipulation. Knowing that he was paying for his actions gave Laura a definitive closure. It was the end of a painful stage, and the beginning of a new life for her and for all the women who had ever been victims of her deception. Although it had been a bitter experience, Laura felt that she had learned invaluable lessons. She had faced her fears, she had discovered her inner strength and, above all, she had learned to value herself as never before. Over time, Laura began to open up to the possibility of meeting someone else, but this time with a clear vision of what she wanted and what she was willing to accept in a relationship. I knew that love didn't have to be blind surrender. True love, she told herself, was a mutual construction based on respect, honesty, and care. She wasn't desperate to find someone, because she now understood that happiness didn't depend on someone else. She herself was enough. One night, while she was having dinner with friends, a man approached her to talk. His smile was kind and his words sincere. At first, Laura felt a mixture of excitement and caution, but this time she didn't rush. He decided to get to know him slowly, enjoying the conversation without expectations or haste. Over time, she discovered that, when a relationship is born from authenticity and respect, love can be something beautiful, without fear, without deception. Laura closed the chapter of her life with Daniel, grateful for the lessons that experience had left her. She knew that she was now a stronger woman, a woman who had learned to know and love herself. And as she moved forward in her new life, she carried with her the assurance that no matter what the future held, she would always be true to her own heart.